My name is Aster Larkwell, and I was 35. The winter my parents taught me the difference between people who mourn you and people who measure you. My husband, Boden, was buried on a Friday morning with ice still hanging from the gutters of the funeral home and black snow pushed against the curb. My parents sat in the back row like strangers who had taken the wrong door. They did not hold my hand. They did not stand beside me. And when they thought I could not hear them, my mother whispered that the funeral was a waste. My father answered that life insurance was meant for the living, not for putting on a show for a dead maintenance man. 6 days later, they came to my kitchen table and demanded the money from that same dead man. They said family needed it. They said Boden was gone, and I had to think about the people who were still here. What they did not know was that grief had made me quiet, not blind. And before that winter ended, I would place their own words, their own signatures, and their own lie in front of an entire room. Welcome back to English Academy 360, Family Revenge Story, where quiet people do not always stay powerless, and family is tested by what they do when there is nothing left to gain. If you have ever been expected to forgive cruelty just because it came from blood, this story is for you. Mine begins in Harthwick, Pennsylvania, a small old mill town where the brick buildings turn dark in the rain and everybody knows which porch light belongs to which family. My family had owned Durnell House for 3 generations. It was a big white event house at the top of Alder Street with tall windows, peeling columns, and a ballroom my mother talked about like it was holy ground. Weddings, fundraisers, retirement dinners, all of it happened there. My father, Fletcher Durnell, called it our legacy. My mother, Mavis, called it the proof that our family mattered. My younger brother, Croy, called it a business, even though he had been losing money in it for years. And my husband, Boden Larkwell, called it exactly what it was. A beautiful old house with too many leaks and too many proud people inside it. Boden was not the kind of man my parents wanted for me. He did not wear suits unless someone died or someone got married. He did not know how to talk over wine glasses at charity dinners. He was the night maintenance chief at Rosefen Children's Hospital, which meant he knew every boiler room, every supply closet, every stubborn elevator, and every nurse who worked the hours no one else wanted. He carried a navy lunch pail with dents along the side, and he always put 2 sandwiches in it, even when he only planned to eat one, because he said somebody in a hospital was always hungry and pretending not to be. My parents saw grease under his nails and decided they knew his worth. They never saw him standing in a freezing parking lot at 2 a.m. helping a nurse jumpstart her car. They never saw him bring a scared father a vending machine coffee because the man's daughter was in surgery. They never saw him come home after 16 hours with a headache and still ask me if I had eaten. They saw a maintenance man. I saw the safest place I had ever lived. The storm came in January, the kind that makes the whole town sound like it is made of glass. Trees cracked all night under ice. Power lines sagged. The road in front of our duplex shined white under the street lamp. Boden was supposed to be off that night, but Rosefen called because the hospital had lost heat in the east wing and the backup system was failing. I remember him standing by the back door, pulling on his coat, telling me it would only take a few hours. I remember being annoyed because the soup was still warm and the news said roads were dangerous. He kissed my forehead and said, "Kids don't get to wait for spring, Star." He was the only person who called me Star, and after he walked out, the house felt too still. That was the last ordinary moment I had. By dawn, Rosefen had moved 32 patients from one wing to another. By breakfast, the hospital administrator was calling me with a voice that kept breaking. Boden had stayed in the service corridor long enough to keep the emergency heat running while nurses moved children and oxygen equipment through the hall. The details after that do not belong to anyone who did not love him. What matters is this: he did not die running from danger. He died making sure other people had time to get away from it. The funeral home was too full for a man my parents called nobody. Rosefen nurses came in navy scrubs after overnight shifts. Custodians stood shoulder to shoulder with doctors. A little boy with a knit cap held a folded card for Boden because Boden had once fixed the TV in his hospital room. A mother I had never met hugged me so hard I almost fell over and told me Boden found her a blanket the night her baby stopped breathing. People kept telling me small things he had done, the kind of things he never came home and bragged about. I stood there numb, accepting stories like someone handing me pieces of a life I had not known was that large. My parents arrived late. My mother wore pearls. My father wore the gray coat he used for business meetings. They did not sit in the front row. They sat in the back, near the side door, as if they wanted the option to escape. I tried not to look at them. I tried to keep my eyes on the casket and on the photograph of Boden beside it, smiling in his work jacket with his hair flattened from a winter hat. Then I heard my mother. Not loud. She was too careful for loud. She leaned toward my father and said, "All this for him? What a waste." My father made a low sound in his throat and said, "Insurance should not be burned on flowers and speeches. The living have needs." I did not turn around. I did not shame them. I did not collapse. I just looked at Boden's photograph and felt something inside me go very cold. There are insults that hit you like fire, and there are insults that freeze in you forever. That one froze. The service continued. Esme Brooks, a charge nurse from Rosefen, stood and spoke about the night of the storm. She did not make Boden into a hero with grand words. She said he knew which pipes would burst first. She said he stayed on the radio until the last minute. She said because of him, no child in that wing lost heat before they could be moved. My parents looked at the floor the whole time. Maybe they were bored. Maybe they were ashamed. I still do not know. Shame requires a heart to land on. After the burial, people came back to my little duplex with casseroles, paper plates, and quiet voices. My parents did not come. Croy texted me that Mom was emotionally drained and Dad's blood pressure was up. Lynette, my brother's wife, sent one message with a white heart and nothing else. I spent that night sitting on the kitchen floor beside Boden's navy lunch pail. It was still by the back door where he had left it the morning of the storm. I could not open it. I could not move it. The metal handle was cold when I touched it, and I pulled my hand back like it had burned me. Grief does strange things to rooms. It makes a chair look guilty for being empty. It makes a pair of boots by the door feel like evidence. It makes the refrigerator hum sound too loud because the person who used to talk over it is not there anymore. For 6 days, I slept in pieces and answered messages from people who had loved him better than my own parents had. On the 6th day, my mother called and said she and my father were stopping by. I thought, foolishly, that maybe the funeral had embarrassed them. I thought maybe grief had finally caught up. I put coffee on because some habits survive even when your life does not. They arrived with Croy and Lynette behind them, all 4 of them dressed like they were going to a bank appointment. My mother kissed the air near my cheek. My father looked around the kitchen like he was inspecting damage. Croy sat without asking. Lynette placed her designer purse on the table and gave me the gentle smile she used when she was about to cut someone. My mother folded her hands and said, "Aster, we need to discuss Boden's policy." Not, "How are you sleeping?" Not, "Do you need anything?" Not even his full name. His policy. I stared at her. She said, Durnell House was in a dangerous place. Taxes were behind. The winter roof repairs had gone over budget. Croy had a lender waiting, but they needed a serious payment. $180,000 would stabilize everything. I asked her why she was telling me that. My father sighed, as if I was being slow on purpose. "Because family keeps family standing," he said, "and you have funds now." Croy leaned forward, with his elbows on my table, the same table Boden had sanded and refinished for me one summer weekend. "You don't have kids, Aster. You don't have a husband to support now. You can't just sit on that kind of money while the family house goes under." There it was. Not concern. Calculation. My life had been reduced to a column where Boden's death had apparently lowered my expenses. Lynette added, soft as cream, it would honor him. I mean, he married into this family. He would want his death to help something lasting. I looked at all of them then, at my mother's pearl earrings, at my father's dry hands, at Croy's impatient face, at Lynette's fake sorrow, and I said, the man you called a waste does not owe you a rescue. The room changed. My mother's mouth tightened. My father told me not to be dramatic. Croy said I had misunderstood, that no one had insulted Boden, that grief was making me bitter. Lynette's eyes moved to the lunch pail by the door, then back to me. You are not the only person hurting, she said. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the sentence was so badly dressed. They were not hurting for Boden. They were hurting for old windows, unpaid taxes, and Croy's pride. I told them to leave. My mother stood slowly, as if she was the wounded one. At the door, she said, you will regret choosing money over family. I wanted to tell her she had chosen reputation over me my entire life. I wanted to tell my father that his legacy had termites in the walls and cruelty in the dining room. Instead, I shut the door and locked it. The coffee had gone cold on the counter. Boden's lunch pail sat by my feet, silent and heavy as a second casket. The gossip started before the week was over. Harthwick is small enough that a story can cross town faster than a snowplow. First, a cousin texted to ask if it was true I had refused to help save Darnell House. Then an aunt said my mother was heartbroken because I had changed since Boden died. Lynette posted a picture of the ballroom with a caption about family history being lost because some people forgot where they came from. She did not name me. She did not have to. Croy told people Boden had once said he wished he could help with the house. Then the lie grew bigger. By the end of the month, I heard that Boden had promised to help, that I had agreed before the funeral, that I was now backing out because I wanted to keep all the insurance for myself. That is how people like my family work. They do not only ask for what they want, they build a story where you become evil for saying no. I wish I could tell you I was strong every minute. I was not. One evening, after 3 calls, 7 texts, and a message from an old family friend saying my father looked sick with worry, I sat at the kitchen table with my bank folder open. $180,000 was too much, but I found myself looking at numbers anyway. I had the policy payment now. It was meant to replace Boden's income, pay the mortgage, cover the hospital bills that insurance had not touched, and keep me from losing the house while I learned how to breathe again. Still, some tired part of me thought maybe if I paid them, the noise would stop. Maybe they would stop using his name. Maybe I could buy silence. That was when Minta Kell knocked once and came in with a pan of cornbread like she owned the place. Minta was my neighbor, 71 years old, retired from the county clerk's office, with white hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. She saw the folder, saw my face, and set the cornbread down. "Don't you dare," she said. I told her I just wanted peace. Minta pulled out the chair across from me and sat like a judge settling in. "Peace is not the same as paying the people who wounded you," she said. "That is just renting quiet from the landlord of your pain." I looked down because I was too tired to argue. She reached across the table and tapped the folder with one finger. "Aster, listen to me. Don't pay people to respect the man they refuse to mourn." That sentence did what shouting could not have done. It went straight through the fog. I closed the folder. Minta nodded once, satisfied. Then she told me something she had learned in 40 years around courthouse files. People who lie out loud are counting on you to answer with emotion. Don't. Answer with records. That night after she left, I wrote down every date I remembered. The storm, the funeral, the kitchen demand, the first gossip text, the first time someone said Boden had promised money. I did not know yet what I was building. I only knew I was done being their soft place to land. A few days later, I finally opened Boden's lunch pail. I did it in the morning because grief is sometimes easier in daylight. Inside was exactly what I expected at first. A folded napkin, 2 peppermint wrappers, a scratched thermos lid, a receipt from the hospital cafeteria. Then I found a stack of small cards held together with a rubber band. Thank you notes. Some written in adult handwriting, some in crooked child letters. Thank you, Mr. Boden, for fixing my mom's chair. Thank you for finding my bear. Thank you for making the heat come back. I read them one by one until the table blurred. At the bottom of the pail was a brass key on a blue tag marked Family Waiting. Under it was a folded sheet of hospital stationery with Boden's handwriting across the top. Warm room idea, it said. Not fancy, not dramatic, just Boden. He had written a plan for a small fund at Rosefen. Blankets, coffee cards, phone chargers, emergency motel vouchers for families trapped by weather while their children were in the hospital. He wanted to call it the Warm Room Fund. I sat there for a long time with the brass key in my palm. My parents wanted to put Boden's insurance into an old ballroom where rich people drank champagne under a leaking ceiling. Boden had wanted to keep scared families warm. That was the moment the money stopped being a number. It became a direction. It became his last kindness, waiting for my hands. I called Esme Brooks at Rosefen that afternoon. I barely got the words out before she started crying. She told me Boden had talked about that idea for months. He had noticed parents sleeping in plastic chairs during storms because roads were closed and hotels were full. He had been saving small things in a storage cabinet: extra blankets, donated chargers, coffee packets. He never wanted credit, Esme said. He just wanted nobody to sit alone and cold if he could help it. After we hung up, I put the brass key on the table beside Minta's list of dates. For the first time since the funeral, I knew what I was protecting. The next week became paperwork. Not dramatic paperwork, no music, no grand scene. Just me and my black coat walking into offices with a folder under my arm. I went to the funeral home first. The director, Mr. Vossler, had kind eyes and the careful voice of a man who sees grief for a living. I asked for copies of any family forms signed the day of the service. He found one that made my hands go still. My parents had signed a financial responsibility refusal. They had declined to contribute to the funeral costs and confirmed that all arrangements and payments belonged to me alone. Their signatures were there, neat and final. The same people telling everyone I had wasted money had put in writing that they wanted no part of paying for the goodbye. Mr. Vossler made me a certified copy. I walked out with that paper flat inside my folder, and the cold air felt sharper than before. Then I met with Ira Fenlow, an insurance attorney Minta recommended. Ira had a narrow office above a pharmacy, and a voice so calm it made every crisis feel like a file that could be sorted. He reviewed the policy. Boden had named me as sole beneficiary years before. There was no assignment, no pledge, no secondary claim, no family right. Ira printed a beneficiary confirmation letter and stamped it with his office seal. "No one can force you to share this," he said. "They can ask. They can lie. But legally, this is yours." I told him Croy was saying Boden had promised the money. Ira looked over his glasses. "Then ask for the promise in writing." I almost smiled. People like Croy do not build lies with paperwork if they think tears will do. That evening, I texted him. "Send me the document where Boden promised Durnell House any insurance money." He did not answer. But Lynette posted another ballroom photo 20 minutes later. That told me enough. 2 days after that, my cousin Karis called. Karis was the kind of cousin you forget is brave because she is so quiet. She worked part-time for a florist and spent most family events refilling coffee so she would not have to talk. Her voice shook when she told me what she had heard. My parents were holding the Durnell House Founders Supper that Saturday. Donors, relatives, old clients, and a lender would be there. Fletcher planned to announce that I was honoring Boden by contributing a large part of his insurance to save the house. Croy had already told 2 donors that my pledge was coming. Lynette had said public gratitude would help me do the right thing. Karis told me not to come. She said they wanted to trap me in a room where refusing would make me look cruel. I thanked her. Then I asked if she would be willing to tell the truth if I needed her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Yes. I should have spoken sooner." If you have ever been pushed into a corner by people who know exactly how to make you look cold, stay with me. This is the part where I learned that boundaries do not feel powerful at first. Sometimes they feel like standing in a room with your knees shaking while everyone waits for you to become useful again. Drop a comment if you know that feeling, and subscribe, because what happened at that supper did not start with a speech. It started with a folder, a brass key, and one woman finally refusing to let dead love be spent by living greed. The day before the supper, I went back to Rosefin Children's Hospital. I had avoided it since Boden died because every hallway smelled like him to me. Disinfectant, old coffee, machine oil, winter coats drying on hooks. Esme met me near the east wing. The repairs were finished now. Heat moved through the vents with a soft, steady sound. She walked me past the family waiting room. There were parents sleeping upright, a grandmother whispering into a phone, a little girl coloring on the floor with one shoe missing. Esme pointed to a service door at the end of the hall. "He was there," she said softly. "He stayed because the transfer team needed 8 more minutes." 8 minutes. My parents had called his funeral a waste. 8 minutes had kept a hallway warm enough for children to move safely through it. 8 minutes was a lifetime when your child was under a blanket and the power was failing. I stood there with Boden's brass key in my pocket and understood that I was not going to the supper to punish my family. I was going because Boden's name deserved a room where lies could not live. Durnell House looked beautiful that Saturday, and that made me sadder than if it had looked ruined. The front porch lights glowed warm against the snow. Candles sat in the windows. Inside, the ballroom smelled like roast beef, old wood, and expensive flowers my brother could not afford. The same portraits of dead Durnells watched from the walls, all stiff collars and proud eyes. My mother saw me enter and smiled with relief too quick to hide. She thought I had come to surrender. My father touched my shoulder in front of a banker and called me sweetheart for the first time in months. Croy hugged me with one arm and whispered, "Just follow Dad's lead." Lynette kissed my cheek and said, "Boden would be so proud tonight." I looked at her long enough for her smile to weaken. Then I stepped away and found Karis near the punch table. She nodded once. At the far side of the room, Esme Brooks stood in a plain navy dress, her hospital badge still clipped to her coat because she had come straight from work. Dinner passed slowly. People spoke about legacy. They praised my parents for keeping Durnell House alive. They talked about preserving history as if history paid property taxes. I ate 2 bites of chicken and nothing else. The folder sat in my lap under the tablecloth. Inside it were my mother's text, the funeral home refusal, the insurance letter, screenshots of Lynette's posts, and an email Karis had forwarded from Croy to a donor saying my pledge was expected that evening. When dessert plates came out, my father stood. He tapped his spoon against a glass, and the room quieted. Fletcher Durnell loved a room that had to listen to him. He thanked everyone for coming. He spoke about hard winters, proud families, and old houses that held memories. Then his voice softened in the way it did when he wanted to look noble. "Our daughter Aster has suffered a loss," he said, turning toward me. "And in that loss, she has been given a chance to turn sorrow into service. Tonight, she will honor her late husband by helping preserve the Durnell legacy he joined when he married her." A murmur moved across the room. My mother lowered her eyes like she was praying. Croy looked hungry. Lynette placed one hand over her heart. My father continued, "Some funerals are large, some costs are heavy, but the living must be wise with what remains." Then Lynette added, just loud enough for 2 tables to hear and repeat, "At least now something useful can come from all of it." Something useful. The words hung there. They thought I would shrink because everyone was watching. But grief had changed the shape of my fear. I stood slowly. The room turned to me. My father smiled like a man handing over a stage. I took the folder from my lap and laid it on the table in front of me. My hands were steady. That surprised me. "Dad," I said, "before anyone thanks me for a gift I never offered, we should talk about what has actually been said." I opened the folder and took out the first page. This is a screenshot of a message Mom sent 2 days after the funeral. My mother's face changed. Not much, but enough. I read it out loud. The service was excessive, a waste, honestly. Boden was not the kind of man who needed all that. A few people shifted in their chairs. My mother whispered my name like a warning. I placed the page on the table. That was how my husband was spoken of before his insurance became useful. Then I took out the second page. This is the funeral home form signed by Mavis and Fletcher Durnell. It says they declined any financial responsibility for Boden's funeral and that all costs belong to me. I let the nearest table see the signatures. So when you hear that I wasted family money, remember the family refused to spend $1 saying goodbye to him. My father's face had gone hard. "This is inappropriate," he said. I nodded. So was announcing my money without asking me. I took out the insurance letter next. This confirms I am the sole beneficiary of Boden Larkwell's life insurance. There is no pledge, no assignment, and no legal claim from Durnell House or anyone in this room. Croy stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You are making us sound like thieves," he snapped. I looked at him. "No, Croy, I am making you sound like people who told donors a dead man's money was coming before his widow had agreed." Then I placed his email on the table. The donor's name was blacked out, but Croy's words were clear. Aster's contribution from Boden's policy should be confirmed at the supper. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The lender near the window leaned forward. That was when the room began to change. Lynette tried to save it. "Everyone is emotional," she said, with that soft little knife in her voice. "Aster is grieving. She is confused." Before I could answer, Kara stood near the punch table. She was pale, but her voice carried. "She is not confused. I was in the kitchen when Aunt Mavis, Uncle Fletcher, Croy, and Lynette planned to pressure her tonight. They said if she refused in public, she would look selfish." My mother turned on her. "Karis." One word, sharp as a slap. Karis swallowed and kept going. They knew she had not pledged anything. That was the second crack. The first was paper. The second was witness. Then Esme Brooks stepped forward. She did not ask permission. She did not need it. She stood in that old ballroom in her plain navy dress and looked at my parents like she had looked at broken machines for 30 years, with no patience for pretending. "I worked with Boden Larkwell," Esme said. "The night he died, the east wing of Rosefen was losing heat during an ice storm. He stayed in the service corridor to keep the system running until we moved the patients. We needed minutes. He gave them to us." The room was silent now. Not polite silent. Real silent. "Your husband was not a waste," she said, looking at me. "His funeral was not a waste. That room was full because people knew what he had done before his death and long before it." I felt the words land somewhere deep, where I had been carrying my parents' insult like a stone. Esme turned back to the room. "And if anyone here thinks his insurance should be used to repair an event house for people who would not honor him, I hope you understand exactly what you are asking his widow to do." Croy lost control then. Loud people often do when quiet evidence stops moving for them. He shouted that I had always looked down on the family, that Boden would have wanted me to help, that Durnell House was more important than some hospital break room idea. The second he said it, he knew he had said too much. My father closed his eyes. My mother went white around the mouth. The lender stood and quietly gathered his coat. One donor pushed Croy's email away like it smelled bad. I did not raise my voice. "The hospital idea has a name," I said. "The Warm Room Fund." Boden wrote it down before he died. Blankets, coffee, chargers, emergency rooms for families trapped by winter while their children are sick. I took the brass key from my pocket and held it in my palm. This key opened the family waiting room at Rosefen. He carried it every night. That is the family he served while you were calling him beneath you. My mother finally spoke. Aster, we are still your parents. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, that sentence did not pull me back. Yes, I said, and you called my husband's funeral a waste. Then you came to my kitchen for the money that came because he died. Being my parents does not make that love. It just makes it worse. My father tried one last time. You would let the family house fall? I picked up the folder and slid the papers back inside. No, Croy's debt did that. Your pride did that. Your lie almost dragged my husband's name into it, but not anymore. I turned to Lynette. You said something useful could come from all of it. You were right. Just not for you. Then I faced the room. Not my family. There is no pledge. There never was. Anyone who was told otherwise was misled. That was all I had come to say. Not a speech. Not revenge the way people imagine it. Just enough truth for the lie to stop breathing. I left before dessert was served. Outside, the snow had started again, light and dry, catching in the porch lights. I stood beside my car and took the first full breath I had taken in weeks. Behind me, through the old windows, people were standing in small groups. My father was talking with both hands. Croy was red-faced. Lynette was crying in a way that looked practiced. My mother was sitting very still. I did not feel victory. I felt empty space where fear had been. Esme came out a minute later and put a hand on my arm. She did not say I had been brave. I was grateful for that. Brave sounded too shiny for what it was. She just said, he would have liked the key part. That made me laugh once and then cry so hard I had to lean against the car. Esme stood there with me in the snow until I could drive. The story of my supposed pledge died that night. Not softly. Public lies do not die gently when they have been fed for weeks. Donors pulled back. The lender froze talks. Someone asked for financial statements Croy had been avoiding. By March, Durnell House was listed for sale. By May, the portrait hall was empty and the ballroom floor was covered in moving blankets. I heard most of it through Karis. I did not answer my mother's calls. My father left 2 messages about betrayal, then one about forgiveness, then stopped. Croy sent a long text saying I had ruined him. I deleted it after the first line. Lynette posted one last picture of the house with a caption about family turning cold. For once, nobody seemed to comment. There is a point where people stop believing the person who is always the victim in every room. My family reached that point without my help. I did not become hard. That is what surprised me most. I thought cutting them off would make me colder. It did the opposite. It gave warmth room to return. Minta came over on Sundays and criticized my coffee while drinking 2 cups. Karis started visiting without pretending she needed to drop something off. Esme called me whenever the hospital board had another form for the fund. Ira handled the legal setup for a fee so low I knew he was lying about his hourly rate. The insurance money did what Boden would have wanted. It paid my mortgage for a while. It cleared the medical bills. It gave me time to heal without selling the house we had painted yellow together. And then a large part of it went to Rosefen Children's Hospital. Not as a grand donation with a giant photograph, but as a steady fund with a simple promise. No family stuck there during a winter emergency would have to sit cold, hungry, and alone if help could reach them. The warm room opened the next January, almost 1 year after the storm. The hospital gave me a choice about the plaque. I kept it plain. The Boden Larkwell Warm Room Fund. For families waiting through the long night. Inside the room were soft chairs, shelves of folded blankets, phone chargers in a basket, coffee packets, tea, crackers, coloring books, and a small locked drawer with emergency hotel cards approved through social services. On the wall near the door, behind a small square of glass, was Boden's brass key with the blue family waiting tag still attached. I stood there before anyone else came in and touched the frame with 2 fingers. For months, I had thought that key opened a room in the hospital. I was wrong. It opened the part of me my parents had tried to close. A young mother used the room first. I did not know her name. Her little boy was upstairs with pneumonia, Roads were icy, and she had not slept in 30 hours. I watched from the hallway as a nurse brought her in. The mother sat down, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, plugged in her phone, and cried without making a sound. Then she fell asleep under the warm lamp with her hand still around a paper cup of coffee. That was Boden. Not the money, not the policy, not the number my family wanted to carve up at a dining table. That sleeping mother was the value my parents never understood. They had looked at my husband and seen a man beneath them. A year after his funeral, his name was keeping strangers warm in the worst hours of their lives. I still pass Darnell House sometimes. It has a new owner now. The columns are painted dark green, and the old family portraits are gone. I thought seeing it would hurt more. It does not. A building is only a legacy if the people inside it know how to love. Otherwise, it is just walls with expensive light fixtures. My parents live in a smaller place outside town. Croy and Lynette moved 2 counties over. I do not wish them misery. That would still be a kind of attention, and I have none left to spend. What I have is my house, my work, my neighbors, and a hospital room with Boden's key on the wall. I have mornings where I wake up and the grief is not the first thing standing beside the bed. I have evenings where I cook for one and still set music playing because silence does not scare me the way it used to. My mother once said his funeral was a waste. She was wrong. It was the last room where everyone who truly knew Boden stood together and told the truth about him. My father said insurance was for the living. He was right, but not in the way he meant. It was for the living mother sleeping under a blanket at Rosefen. It was for the father charging his phone so he could call home. It was for the grandmother drinking hot tea at 2 a.m. while a child she loved fought through the night. It was also for me, the widow they thought would be easy to corner, easy to shame, easy to spend. The money did not make me rich. It made me steady. The records did not make me cruel. They made me free. So that is my story. My parents called my husband's funeral a waste, then demanded his insurance. They built a public room to pressure me, and I brought the truth into it. Not because I wanted applause, not because I wanted to ruin them, because some names deserve protection after death, especially from people who never honored them in life. If someone in your life keeps calling your pain selfish while reaching for what your pain left behind, let this be your sign. Keep the text. Keep the form. Keep the letter. And when the time comes, do not scream. Set the page down. Tell me in the comments who showed up for you when there was nothing to gain. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight, and subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, hard truth, and the kind of family people prove by showing up. Pure commentary, discussion, and life lessons. Now, hold this story right at the funeral scene. Do not rush past it, because the whole story is born in that one cold room. Aster is standing there as a widow. Her husband is gone. The people who truly knew him are filling the room with respect. Nurses are there. Hospital workers are there. Families are there. People who saw Boden's kindness in real life are there. And where are Aster's parents? In the back row, sitting like guests who do not want to be connected to the grief. That detail is not small. That detail tells us everything. When your own parents sit away from you at your husband's funeral, they are not only choosing a seat, they are choosing a side. And then comes that line, "What a waste." Let's pause there. A funeral is not a waste. A funeral is the last public language of love. It says, this person mattered. It says, this life had weight. It says, we will not let this person disappear like they were nothing. So when Aster's mother calls Boden's funeral a waste, she is not only insulting the service, she is insulting his whole life. She is saying that a working man, a quiet man, a man with grease on his hands and kindness in his pockets, did not deserve a room full of people saying goodbye. That is why this insult feels so painful. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is whispered. And sometimes the whispered insult cuts deeper than the shouted one, because it shows what people truly believe when they think nobody important is listening. Mavis and Fletcher did not think Boden was valuable Because Boden did not fit their idea of success. He did not own a grand house. He did not speak like a businessman. He did not bring status to their family name. But here is the question for us as the audience. Who gave more to the world? The man who kept hospital children warm during a storm, or the family that protected an old building while letting their daughter stand alone? Now look at the timing of the money demand. 6 days after the funeral. Not 6 months. Not after Aster had healed. Not after they had sat with her, fed her, helped her sleep, helped her breathe. 6 days. That is not family concern. That is financial hunting. They waited just long enough for the funeral flowers to begin dying. Then they walked into her kitchen and started talking about the policy. And notice that word. They do not say Boden. They do not say your husband. They do not say the man you loved. They say policy. In their mouths, Boden has already stopped being a human being and become paperwork. This is where the story becomes bigger than one family, because many people know this feeling. Maybe it is not insurance. Maybe it is inheritance. Maybe it is your salary. Maybe it is your house, your car, your time, your emotional energy, your free labor. Some people ignore you when you are hurting, but suddenly remember you when they need something. They call it family duty. They call it sacrifice. They call it respect. But real respect shows up before the money is mentioned. Croy's words are important too. He says Aster has no children and no husband now, so she does not need that much money. Listen to how cold that thinking is. He is not looking at his sister as a widow. He is doing math on her loss. In his mind, one dead husband equals fewer expenses. That is a cruel way to see a person. Because grief does not reduce your needs. Grief increases them. You need time, you need safety. You need space to fall apart without losing your home. You need money for bills, therapy, repairs, food, all the things your partner used to help carry. But selfish people do not count invisible weight. They only count what they can take. Now, one of the strongest parts of Aster's character is that she almost gives in. That may sound strange, but it makes her real. If she was strong every second, we would admire her, but we might not believe her. The truth is, exhausted people often think about surrender, not because they agree, not because they are weak, because they are tired of being blamed, tired of messages, tired of family members calling, tired of explaining the same truth to people who have already chosen the lie. Sometimes you do not want justice. You just want the noise to stop. That is why Minta matters. Minta is not a superhero. She does not bring money. She does not bring a lawyer at first. She brings one sentence that wakes Aster up. Do not pay people to respect the man they refuse to mourn. That is the kind of line people need in real life. Because manipulation works best when you are tired. Manipulators do not always attack you when you are strong. They wait until you are grieving, confused, ashamed, or alone. Then they make their demands sound like the only way to keep peace. Minta reminds Aster that peace bought with self-betrayal is not peace. It is only silence with a bill attached. Now let's look at the lunch pail. That navy lunch pail is the emotional center of the story, not the insurance letter, not the event house, the lunch pail. Because inside, it is the truth about Boden that proud people refuse to see. Thank you cards, a brass key, a plan for the warm room fund. That is beautiful because Boden's legacy is not revealed through a bank account. It is revealed through small kindness, a child thanking him, a family waiting room key, a handwritten plan for blankets and coffee. This tells us that a life does not have to be loud to be large. And this is where the story gives us its moral split. On one side, we have Durnell House, a big old building polished for the public events, full of portraits and pride, but drowning in debt and lies. On the other side, we have the Warm Room Fund, a simple hospital room with blankets, chargers, coffee, and shelter for scared families. One is about image, the other is about care. One is about preserving a family name. The other is about helping strangers survive the hardest night of their lives. That contrast is the real heart of the story. Aster's parents think legacy means a building. Boden shows us legacy means what people feel because you lived. If a mother can sit under a warm blanket because of your kindness, that is legacy. If a nurse remembers your name because you made her job easier during a crisis, that is legacy. If a widow can still find your purpose inside an old lunch pail, that is legacy. A family house can be sold, a ballroom can be repainted, a name on a wall can come down. But a kindness that keeps moving after death is harder to erase. Now let's go into the founder's supper, because this is where the family's plan turns against them. Fletcher thinks he understands public pressure. He thinks if he places Aster in a room full of donors, relatives, and important town people, she will not dare to say no. He expects her to protect his reputation even after he refused to protect her heart. That is how controlling families think. They believe your fear of looking bad is stronger than your need to be free. But Aster walks in with a folder, and that folder changes the power in the room. Her parents come with emotion. Croy comes with entitlement. Lynette comes with performance. Aster comes with evidence. This is why her calm is so powerful. She does not need to shout because the papers are already speaking. The text message speaks. The funeral refusal form speaks. The insurance letter speaks. Croy's fake pledge email speaks. One by one, the lies lose air. There is a lesson here that is very practical. When people twist the story, do not trust memory alone. Keep the record. Keep the text. Keep the email. Keep the signed form. Not because you want to live in bitterness, but because truth sometimes needs a body. A document gives truth a body. A date gives truth a spine. A signature gives truth a voice that does not shake. Aster's family wanted to turn the whole town into pressure. Aster turned the room into witnesses. Lynette's role is also worth noticing. She is not the loudest villain, but she is dangerous because she knows how to make cruelty sound polite. She says things like, Aster is grieving and she is confused. That sounds soft, but it is actually a way to erase Aster's voice. Some people do this in real life. When they cannot answer your point, they attack your emotional state. They say you are too upset, too sensitive, too bitter, too dramatic. The goal is simple. If they can make you look unstable, they do not have to deal with the truth you are telling. That is why Karis standing up matters. Karis breaks the family spell. She is not giving a big speech. She simply says what she heard. She confirms the plan. And suddenly, Aster is not just a grieving widow with papers. She is a woman with a witness. Many times, one honest witness can break a whole room of fake agreement. Karis shows us that courage does not always look like leading the fight. Sometimes courage is standing up late, voice shaking, and still telling the truth. Then Esme speaks, and the whole meaning of Boden's life enters the room. This part is powerful because Esme does not talk like a family member. She talks like someone who saw the work. She says Boden gave the hospital 8 more minutes. 8 minutes. In a normal room, 8 minutes feels small. At a hospital, during an ice storm, 8 minutes can be everything. 8 minutes can move a child. 8 minutes can keep oxygen equipment safe. 8 minutes can give nurses enough time. This is how the story teaches us that quiet work can have enormous value. And now, Croy exposes himself. He calls Boden's dream some hospital break room idea. That line is ugly, but it is useful because it reveals him. He is not only desperate, he is dismissive. He cannot understand why scared hospital families matter more than his event house. He cannot understand why Aster would choose blankets and motel vouchers over chandeliers and portraits. That is the exact moment the room sees him clearly. Not as a struggling brother, but as a man willing to spend a dead person's dignity for his own rescue. Aster's best moment is not when everyone turns against her family. It is when her mother says, "We are still your parents," and Aster does not fold. That sentence is one of the oldest weapons in family conflict. I am your mother. I am your father. He is your brother. She is your sister. But titles are not permission slips for cruelty. Aster understands this at last. Being someone's parent should make love deeper, not make betrayal easier to excuse. If anything, the damage hurts more because it came from people who were supposed to protect her. This is why the story is not really about revenge. It is about correction. Aster corrects the lie that Boden was a waste. She corrects the lie that she promised money. She corrects the lie that family duty means letting people use your grief. She corrects the lie that a working man's life has less value than a wealthy family's reputation. And after correcting the record, she leaves. That leaving is important. She does not stay to argue every point. She does not beg them to understand. She does not stand there waiting for an apology that may never come. She says enough truth, then walks out. The aftermath is also handled in a mature way. Darnell House falls, but the story does not ask us to cheer like children. It simply shows cause and effect. Croy lied to donors. Fletcher supported pressure. Mavis protected image over love. Lynette spread the story. Their own choices damaged them. Aster does not need to destroy the house. The truth removes the fake support holding it up. That is different from revenge. That is consequence. And the ending with the warm room is the true victory. Not the sale of Darnell House. Not Croy's embarrassment. Not Mavis losing control of the story. The victory is that Boden's insurance becomes warmth. It becomes coffee in a long night. It becomes a phone charger for a parent who needs to call home. It becomes a hotel card when roads are frozen. It becomes a quiet place to cry without being watched. And that is how Aster turns pain into purpose without letting greedy people steal it. Now think about the title again. My parents called my husband's funeral a waste, then demanded his insurance. At first, it sounds like a shocking family betrayal. But after the full story, we understand it is also a moral test. Can you reject a person's value and still claim the benefit of their death? Aster's answer is no. You do not get to disrespect the life and spend the legacy. You do not get to call the goodbye a waste and then reach for the money attached to the loss. The life lesson here is not that every family conflict needs a public reveal. The lesson is deeper. The lesson is that truth needs protection. Love needs protection. Memory needs protection. When someone you loved is gone, there may be people who try to rewrite what that person meant. They may make the story about money, property, reputation, or obligation. But you are allowed to guard the meaning of that life. You are allowed to say, no, this is not yours to use. Another lesson is that kindness is not weakness. Boden was kind. Aster was quiet. For a while, her family mistook both of those things for low value. But kindness and quietness are not the same as emptiness. Boden's quiet work filled a hospital with gratitude. Aster's quiet proof filled a ballroom with truth. The loudest people in the story are not the strongest. The strongest people are the ones who keep showing up with steady hands. And there is one more thing we should not miss. Aster does not heal by becoming like her family. She does not become cruel. She does not start measuring people by money. She does not spend the rest of her life chasing their downfall. She builds something warm. That is the cleanest kind of victory. When someone tries to make you bitter, and you still build something kind, you have won in a way they cannot understand. So, when we watch this story, we are not only watching Aster expose her parents. We are watching her choose what kind of person grief will make her. Her family wanted grief to make her useful to them. Minta helped her make grief careful. Boden's lunch pail helped her make grief meaningful. The warm room helped her make grief generous. That is a powerful journey, and maybe that is why this story stays with us. Because at some point, every person has to ask, who showed up when I had nothing to give? Who respected my pain when there was no reward? Who said my loved one's name with care? Those are the people who deserve space in your life, not the ones who arrive after the funeral asking about the policy, not the ones who call your boundaries selfish, not the ones who want your sacrifice, but not your sorrow. Aster's final message is simple, but it is strong. Do not let people spend what they refuse to honor. Do not let family titles erase family wounds. The end.